In the introduction, we discussed the fact that Ruby is an object-oriented programming language, and I pointed out several times that almost everything in Ruby is an object, and that's one of its strengths. Now, in other languages, that's not always the case. A lot of languages have something they call primitives, which are like the basic object types that we're about to talk about, but primitives don't have a common relationship to each other. In the case of Ruby, all of these object types that we're going to discuss are all related because all of them are objects. That's the fundamental building block that everything else is built off of. So keep that in mind in Ruby. Everything is an object. Everything you manipulate is an object, and everything that's returned by your manipulation is also an object. So what is an object? Well, we call it an object because it's rather analogous to an object that you would have in the real world. So for example, in the real world, we would have an object that would be a classroom, right? That's a thing. And that could be modeled in Ruby as being an object as well. And in the real world, we would have students that would be in the classroom, and those students would also be modeled as objects. And each of the desks in the classrooms could be an object, and so on. Now, in the real world, a classroom can contain many desks and have many students who are sitting in a certain order, and we can move students around between the desks, have certain students who are maybe absent on a certain day. All of those kind of complex behaviors we can use objects to talk about, and it's really analogous to what we're used to in the real world, which makes it nice and easy. But objects can also be abstract. We could have an object for the communication that occurs between students, right? We could treat their conversation as if it was a physical thing. So it's not always just going to be an actual physical object that we're thinking of when we're modeling things in Ruby. Now, in programming terms, an object is actually an instance of a class. We'll talk a lot more about instances and classes in Ruby a little later, but using our example, each unique student would be one example of the more general classification student. In programming, we would say that each student is an object or an instance of the class student. They are all unique, but they have something in common too. Now that we understand that everything in Ruby is an object, let's take a look at these basic object types that exist in Ruby and begin learning to program with them.